Good morning, everyone. My name is Wendy Custer. I am the Member Relations Specialist here at the Chamber of Commerce. We are thrilled today to have Dr. What are you, Harry Speaker? Dr. Laura Sicola to speak for us today. Harry and I will be helping with the chat box, and so if you have any questions, please put them in there. And I believe Laura will also see them. And if she has some time during her presentation, she'll address some of those. If not, we'll do them at the very end. And I want to thank Harry very much for being our sidekick today. She's going to help us make this run smoothly as well. And Laura?
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much, Wendy, for the introduction. Can everybody just give me a quick thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me all right? I want to make sure that the sound is coming through all right. I think if there's or you can type yes, whichever works. Just want to make sure there's no problems along those. Here, yes, a couple of yeses coming in. Great, great, great. So glad. Okay, welcome. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to do my screen share here. And we are here to talk about speaking to influence. Now, quick question. True or false? Put it in the chat. You wish that when you spoke, more people would just listen, get it, and do it. True or false? Just listen, get it, and do it. To me, I think that would make life so much easier. You know, don't you just realize people should know that you're right? People should understand that you know what's going on, and if they just followed your advice, that life would work so much more smoothly, right? I got an amen. I love it. Yes. Okay. So why doesn't that happen? Well, there's an issue involved. Leadership, which is the idea of not just being the boss, but getting people to follow you voluntarily, is whatever you've discussed, and I'm sure we've discussed this, a million times ad nauseum in various chats. As far as I'm concerned, it's an image. And that image is based in great part on the way that you communicate. So part of the reasons why there's two major buckets with regard to why more people don't just listen, get it, and do it. Half of those reasons are external factors, things like, okay, budgets, time issues, could be the weather, could be issues like racism, sexism, all the other isms that are out there. Those are outside of my purview. Those are not things that I can change today. The other bucket, however, are internal factors. These are things we do that get in our own way, primarily through the way that we communicate with others. And that's what I want to take a look at today. That's what we're going to figure out how to dissect and take a good look inside ourselves and say, you know what? Okay, I could see where maybe that's not landing the way I want it to land. Because the biggest gap in the world is the 3 inches between here and here, right? You ever have those moments where you hear something come out of your mouth and you go, that sounded better in my head, right? So maybe you saw yourself on video. What is it that creates that mismatch? And where does that undermine our effectiveness? That's what we're going to look at today so that you leave with clarity on what you need to start looking for to make sure that your messages land the way you intend and that you get the results that you want more frequently. Now, part of the challenge, of course, as women, our whole lives, we've been socialized to play different communication games from the guys. Men are socialized to play football, communication-wise. And that means that they have this giant range on the field where they can run back and forth, change their styles pretty freely, and it's all considered more or less acceptable, or at the very least excusable. They have to really go to pretty extreme distances before they're considered to be sort of colossal wimps or colossal jerks. The women, on the other hand, we're socialized to play gymnastics, to be gymnasts. And our event is the beam. We feel like we've got this 4-inch wide strip, this line we have to walk, and we have to balance our way very carefully, because if we teeter too far to one side, then we get a reputation as being somebody who can just be walked all over, stepped on. And of course, if we tip a little too far to the other side, we get a slightly different reputation, sometimes with a capital B, which we don't truly appreciate either. So the question then becomes, how do we take back the yardage? How do we get on the field with the guys and learn to use that range of styles to our advantage, to flex to the different audiences so that they can hear us the way they need to in order to be able to hear our message and receive it, but in a way that's still authentic to who we are. Because we don't want to have to talk like men, act like men, all that kind of stuff. We still want to be us, but we want to get through to whoever the audience is. So this breaks down now to the way that we speak. And at the foundation of leadership is the image of credibility. And by the way, as we go through the rest of today, I meant to mention initially, rather than just have me go through my program and you wait until the end for Q&A. If you've got specific questions that with regard to anything that I'm talking about here, feel free to put it in the chat. I've got one eye on that chat box and I'll do my best to answer your questions as they arise organically in the moment. To the extent that it's relevant to what's on screen. Sometimes I may miss them or I will choose to hold off until the end for some of them, in which case we will use the time at the end for that. But do feel free, please, to put in comments, put in questions, chat with each other, anything you'd like with as we go through. All right, so now let's talk about speech and credibility. When you talk, you have to communicate your message through 3 channels all at the same time. The first channel is the verbal channel. This is what you say, the content of your message. Imagine that somebody recorded what you said and then wrote down the transcript. Looking at that transcript, looking at that text, what do you see? That's your verbal channel. Then, of course, there's not just the what you say, but there's how you say it. And how you say it is broken down into 2 other channels. The second channel is the vocal channel. This is the sound of those words as they come out. And the third is the visual channel. And this is what you're physically communicating, everything from your facial expressions to how you're groomed or dressed. And in this virtual world, it includes the physical, visual, video environment that people see. All of that lends to or detracts from your credibility when there's a lack of alignment. And because the problem is when what people see and hear doesn't match, when those 3 channels are sending mixed signals to people, then the audience somehow doesn't quite know what to believe. So for example, if I said to you, I gave you my introduction and I said, I'm Laura Sicola and my company is Vocal Impact Productions. I host a podcast called Speaking to Influence and I wrote a book. It's called Speaking to Influence also. My TED Talk has 6 million views on it. And I work with companies like Comcast and Independence and IBM. Okay, you get where I'm going with this? The fact is, the verbal channel, what I said was 100% true. I didn't give you any false statistics about that. But you're going, what? Like, I don't know why she'd lie, but I don't really get how that's true. Like 6 million hits. Why? And Comcast and Independence hired her. Why? Something doesn't gel, right? So my credibility is in question. And what research shows, and this is probably the most misquoted statistic in all of communications research. So bear in mind, I want you to really focus on what I'm saying here, that when you are out of alignment, your gut instinct primarily homes in on what you see first and foremost. So if I'm kind of like all over the place physically, that's the first biggest distractor that you're going to go in on. That's what's going to be what you use to judge and to evaluate me. The next biggest distractor, as far as where your attention will go, is the vocal channel. This is the sound of your voice, in particular the tonality, which is the highs and the lows. And we'll talk more about tonality later, but it's about your pitch. So then when those pieces have been teased apart and your attention is all over the place with those components, that only leaves about 7% of your attention to be able to peer through the mess and just focus exclusively on what the person is saying without any interpretation based on the delivery. So the problem, of course, is that when you think about it, when you prepare for a meeting, a video conference, a presentation, anything else, where do you put most of your prep? Where do you put most of your time and effort? If you're like most people, it's in the content, right? It's in the handouts, it's in the outline of the materials, it's in the email, it's in your slides, and you might rehearse. But that basically means just sort of clicking through the slides real quick and going, yeah, 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 I remember what I'm going to talk about there. Yeah, yeah, conceptually, I remember what this is going to be. You look at your outline and you think through it. But again, there's that huge gap between here and here. You understand conceptually what you want to say, but if you don't really work through how to get it out crisp and clean, you're most likely not going to be as effective in your delivery, as compelling, as persuasive as you'd like it to be. Now, the goal, of course, is that when you are in alignment and all three of those channels are reinforcing the same three-dimensional message, then the audience only has one point to focus on, your core message. And then those numbers are null and void. They do not exist. Then 100% of their attention is focused on what you want them to hear and understand. And you're far more likely to get that yes that you're looking for. So with that, let's break down each of these three channels so that you can start to understand what are the pieces in these and how do you control for them. All right, first and foremost, fillers. Look, we all know we're not supposed to use them. If you've been part of Toastmasters at any time, they've probably done their best to beat them out of you. But we also, being the professional, highly educated, highly successful women that we are, tend to have professional, highly educated, highly sophisticated fillers that sneak in. Words like actually, basically, probably, they're just as useless. And they still find ways to pepper themselves into our speech as cover, as space taker-uppers. Either way, they're not doing us any good. So be mindful of what's the crutch that sneaks its way in. Record yourself and listen, because chances are you actually don't know what your filler is. You probably think, oh, well, I say too much. Then you record and you go, wow, I said like 47 times. What's that all about? You would be surprised. Organization. Everybody likes to listen to an interesting story, right? A little windy journey here and there, hold my attention. But there's a difference between an interesting path in the journey and something that's so twisty and turny that your audience is going, okay, where is she taking me with this? Just where are you going with this? I don't have, you're losing me. Get to the point. So we need to make sure that we're focused and clear in our intention so people know why they should continue to listen. The importance of being able to get to the point is paramount. And the higher you go up the chain of command, as it were, the higher up your audience is, the more important it becomes, because the less time they have. And they need to then be able to take what you have said, if you talked for 5 minutes or 55 minutes, if they need to relay your key point up to their stakeholders, whoever it is, whether it's clients, the board of directors, the CEO, whatever, if you can't distill your core messages, your key takeaway points for them into a simple couple of bullets, they're not going to be able to take all 55 minutes of your message and transmit it directly and or distill it down. If you can't get it down to the key points, how do you expect anybody else to, who's far less familiar with it than you are? Think of it this way. At the end of your presentation, you need to be able to say to people, if you forget everything else I said, remember this. Boom, boom, boom. And it might just be one. That's okay. But you need to spoon feed them that big takeaway point or those pieces of advice. Einstein had a great quote. He said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And I think that's great. I think it was Twain who similarly said, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. We tend to sort of think out loud. We talk and talk and talk until we eventually figure out what we mean by something. But people don't want to go on that journey with us. They want us to figure it out first and then give it to them wherever possible. Diplomacy and tact, also incredibly important. How do we define these terms? There's a couple of definitions that I particularly like. One is by Isaac Newton, and it's the art of making a point without making an enemy. This, I think, essentializes the real balance that most people struggle with. People need to balance the importance of of maintaining the integrity of the message, the clarity of the message. Do you understand what I need you to do? Do you understand what my point is? And at the same time, needing to maintain the integrity of the relationship, not hurt people's feelings, not step on people, not insult or offend or ruffle feathers along the way. If you're too worried about the clarity of the message, often you will step on toes. If you're too worried about maintaining your relationship and being nice, not being offensive, not hurting anybody's feelings, sometimes that's at the expense of having people go, okay, so do you need me to do something, or what exactly is the point? Just spit it out already. So finding that balance is really the key to being heard, understood, and appreciated in the process. Now, if this is a little too touchy-feely for you, perhaps you're more a Winston Churchill fan who is known to have said that tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip. Usually in an audience where I can see your faces, I'm seeing an awful lot of heads starting to nod at this point going, okay, yeah, I get that. One way or another, it's still the idea of, can you balance clarity of the point with clarity, maintaining the integrity of the relationship? So finding that balance is when you have mastered the art of tact. All right, vocal. Let's talk. Somebody was nodding. That's great. So let's talk now about the vocal channel. This is the sound of your message as it comes across. Now, sound quality is paramount. I want you to see something. Especially in this virtual realm where we all find ourselves, I'm going to take myself off of sharing the screen for a second. Now, I'm using my podcaster mic. It is a Cadillac of a microphone, but even prior to buying this one a couple of months ago, I had another one that was about $100, decent mic, not ridiculous, but still external. Why? Because if I just use my internally embedded microphone, and I've got a big 20-something inch desktop iMac, about $3,000 computer when I bought it a year or two ago. So, it's a pretty high-end piece of equipment, all things considered. But I'm going to switch now to my Mac embedded mic. Ready? 3, 2, can you hear the difference now? Type in the chat box if you hear the difference in my sound quality. You should hear something pretty significant in the difference. Yes? I'm hearing a lot of yeses, big difference, right. Wow is right. Now, how many of you are familiar with the concept of Zoom fatigue? How many of you have heard that expression before? Zoom fatigue, right? So it's not just about being sick of seeing yourself on video, which, believe me, I'm on video so much, I really don't want to look at my own face anymore by the end of the day. And often by the middle of the day, I'm tired of looking at my own face. So the thing is, Zoom fatigue is real, and it's not just a metaphor. I'm going to switch back to, and it's about your sound. Watch this. When I shift back to my good mic, if your ears could exhale, tell me if they don't go, ah. Okay, I'm back on my good microphone now. Did your ears just exhale? Yes, hand raising emphatically. Good. Yes, you can. So setting the video, that's awesome. That's different too. Yes. So note that when you're on that really muffled sound from somebody's bad internal mic, if you have to listen to that all day, you have to concentrate harder to really catch what they're saying. And when your brain has to sustain that intensity of concentration, that's mentally fatiguing. So it's not just about Zoom, but it's that sound overall. And so of course you're going to be really, really tired by the end of the day. Plus, if you are struggling to hear other people, subconsciously, you're also probably assuming that they're having a hard time hearing you. So you end up talking louder and pushing from here. And then you wonder why at the end of the day, you're tired. Well, duh. So make sure that your sound is good. Plus, when you think about your image, your reputation, your credibility, your image of authority and leadership, if I sound like this, and then you talk and you sound like this, doesn't it just automatically make you want to sort of tune this person out? You don't want to have that impression where this person sounds awesome and this person sounds awful. If anything, you want it the opposite, because most people sound like this. when you're talking to them. So you want that contrast where everybody's going, what? When this person is talking, and then you talk and everybody goes, ooh, I can hear that. Let's focus on what she's saying. When that sudden clarity comes through from another person, your ears automatically, magnetically get drawn to it. You're inherently more compelling as a result. So ladies, do not be penny wise and pound foolish. So, your earbuds are okay. They help, but you need to really test with some friend on the other end of a Zoom call and say, what if I plug in these earbuds? What if I do this? What if I use my AirPods? So I'm going to go back to my shared screen for a second, because the fact is, whether you use a headset, and there are some good headsets out there, headsets are fine. It's not about standalone mics like this versus headsets. $50 to $100, you can get a really good headset. Jabra, Audio Technica, Logitech, Blue Yeti. Some of them are more expensive than others, but for $50 to $100, you can get a pretty decent piece of equipment. And whatever it is, it'll be better than what's embedded in your device. AirPods, you may have them. If you do, try them out. Again, they will most likely be better than whatever is in your embedded in your device. But if you don't have them yet, do not waste your money. I've got them here too. All I can tell you is that for the $180 or so that they cost to buy, the microphone, they sound great, right? The speaker quality is great, but the microphone quality is lousy. I've had to use it before, when I was in transition with microphones, when my old one finally died, but it is very tin canny sounding. So if you're going to drop $180, $200 on a mic, do something really good and make it a standalone mic. Do not waste your time with AirPods. That is for listening, jogging, whatever, knock yourself out. But if you need it for this purpose, they're way expensive for the value that you're going to get from them. Okay. Yeah. So the brands again, I would say, okay, so here's my 4 steps, my 4 filters on Amazon. Number 1, you can go for brands, filter for brands, Audio Technica, which is what you see here in the middle, Jabra, Jabra, Logitech, Blue Yeti, which is, I believe only has standalone stuff. There's probably something else that I'm forgetting, but any of those 4 are really great. And then decide if you want headset versus standalone mic. Then you may filter for 4 stars and above in user ratings. And it has to be from hundreds of ratings, not just dozens of ratings. And of course, then you can put in your preferred budget, $75, 70, I would say 70 to 100. You can really get a good mic. Right? Feel free to upgrade beyond that. But make sure it has a USB connector. See that picture in the middle? That's got a USB connector. I don't like Bluetooth. Bluetooth just is asking for trouble. And it's spotty and Wi-Fi dependent. Use a USB connector for this. Make sure it does not, when you start to get higher into like the 150 and above range, a lot of the microphones have XLR cables, which is a big fat round plug like you plug into an amp. And that's what this one has. So it requires another piece of equipment before you can plug it into your computer. And that's a headache unless you really are planning on just being on Zoom or, on video all the time, making recordings, making whatever, doing a podcast or something else, then yes, upgrade, email me afterwards and I'll give you other suggestions. But otherwise make sure it's got a USB hardwire connection in. And yes, everything works on Mac. You just have to buy another doggone dongle. That's all there is to it. Everything requires you to buy another $50 to $75 adapter. I am all Mac all the time. It's all about the stupid dongles. So you can do it. And yes, you need to do it. Do not let Apple tell you have to just buy their AirPods or their devices. Don't let them bully you into that. All right. Speed, pauses, and nerves. Very simply, the more anxiety you feel about something, the more stress or pressure, the faster you tend to talk. And in order to hold that back, to pull yourself back, you need to do a couple of things. 1, pause. Do not go into your run-on sentence mode. If you listen to if you look at the transcript or you listen to the recording of yourself, what you'll probably realize is that it is one long run-on sentence. There's no period until you get cut off or run out of stuff to say. And that is the auditory equivalent of that friend of yours who sends you the text messages that are missives this long with no punctuation, no capitalization, no grammar, just run on. And as soon as you get through the first 4 lines, you're like, oh God, pal, I can't read this. If you figure out what you're talking about, give me a message, but I'm not going to decipher this mess, right? You've all had that one. So, and to Carol, the other one was Audio Technica. So make sure that that when you're talking, you use complete sentences. And by complete, I mean they end, and then you pause and you start another sentence. You don't need a long pause, but you can hear as I'm talking to you, I get to the end of the point and then I stop. There's a period at the end of the sentence and a little space. That's where I breathe. Breathing is good. We like breathing. So make your point, finish it. Let people hear the end of it, and then you make your next point and then move on. It helps them organize your thoughts in their mind. And then just simply making sure that when you feel the anxiety kick in, you talk at a speed that feels uncomfortably slow to you, because adrenaline distorts your perception of time and reality. And when you feel like you're talking at a normal speed, you're actually racing. When you feel like it's oddly slow and awkwardly plodding, that's when you're actually talking at a speed that everybody else feels like is normal. So trust me that you can't trust yourself when adrenaline is leading the charge. Okay. So be careful of your speed. Vocal fry is that pattern that maybe people start talking okay and then they kind of trail off at the end of their sentences and they get this gravelly, creaky sound. Now, this happens for a number of reasons, in part going back to what we just discussed with regard to those run-on sentences, because if you're running on sentence because you're afraid that that guy over there is going to cut you off, because if you stop to take a breath, then he's going to jump in and you'll never get a chance to talk back, so you don't allow yourself to refill your air tanks, and that's where vocal fry comes in. It's also a cue to the audience that you're a little nervous or apprehensive, because if your brain is going, ooh, do I really want to say this? What if they don't like it? What if I make a mistake? What if I'm feeling anxious and you're physically holding back? Your body doesn't allow the air to come out. So you kind of trail off. And this is sort of how your voice squeaks out. It doesn't sound authoritative. It doesn't sound confident. And it's basically like a blinking yellow arrow pointing at you going, she's nervous. She's not confident. She doesn't trust herself or you one way or another. So make sure that you don't allow yourself to fry out at the ends of your sentences. The ends of your sentences should be just as important as the beginning of your sentences. If not, your sentence went on way too long and you should have cut it off before you got to the unimportant stuff. Unless, of course, you think that the Kardashians are the paragon of leadership, and then you can, fry out all you want and be just like them, and it's really cool. Or not. How about upspeak? Upspeak is the tonality that we talked about in the beginning. Tonality is the highs and the lows in your pitch, and upspeak is that pattern that sounds like you're asking questions, even when you're not, because you go up at the end of all your phrases and sentences, like I'm doing now. Now, of course, this eventually gets annoying at the very least. And the impression, of course, tends to conjure up that Valley Girl image, that very young, teenagery, a little on the ditzy side, certainly not authoritative or leaderly. And the problem, of course, is that because you have all of those rising tones that sound like questions, they actually reflect a pattern in English, a good, useful, deliberate grammatical pattern known as a tag question. Tag questions are like phrases like, right, okay. And there's a time and a place to ask those. But if you're going to ask them, ask them. Don't just let your voice constantly inflect it over and over, because then it sounds like you are begging for validation. If every phrase sounds like you're saying, is that okay? Do you know what I mean? Am I right? Can you confirm? Then I'm not a leader, because I am putting the power in your hands. I'm giving away my power because I'm saying you need to validate me. I have just disempowered myself. So make sure, once again, that you let your voice drop at the ends of your sentences. And despite the fact that this is a, teenagery, Valley Girl kind of stereotype, men and women, older and younger, more educated and less educated, entry level to C-suite executive, has just the same degree of propensity for sliding into it at different times. So, and often it happens because we're in mental list mode, where it's like, I want to talk about this and about this and about this, and I have these points, and I guess I'm done. So as you're going through everything, whether it's items on an agenda, steps in a sequence, or points, just multiple things you want to include, you don't realize that it's your brain going comma, 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 and I guess I run out of stuff to say, so now I'll put the period. Make sure that you, again, don't go into that run on sentence mode, because when you do, you're much more likely to fall into upspeak patterns. All right, and finally, let me double check my time here, and we're going to slide into the visual mode. I like the acronym PEGS as a quick little mental checklist about how to monitor your own physical visual communication. P is for posture and positioning. Whether you're standing or sitting, the fact is your posture matters. If you're kind of slumped over, you just don't look powerful. You look tired, you look small, not in a good ways, if any sort of strength involved. And not to mention, when you're hunched over, you're compacting your lungs. So you can't really take that full breath, and you're a lot more likely to fry out when you're just sort of sitting back in the chair. Having good posture allows you to have a nice full voice as well. And on camera, where, let's face it, we all are nowadays, the position of your camera also matters. I'm in right now what I call the 6 o'clock news anchor position. I'm going to stop my share for a second and do my best not to dislodge my own um, Ethernet cable. But I want you to think about how you would judge me if I ran the rest of the training today like this, because this is where most people do their presentations from. So if I talked like this, and this is, how I ran my training on leadership presence and speaking to influence, if you were to type it in the chat box, how many people think that this looks really powerful and authoritative? Most people would, those are not the phrases that would come to mind, right? So, but this is what most people do. They draw an imaginary line across the middle of the screen, and then either the head or the full body, if this is a family selfie vacation picture or video, the person takes up the lower half and the top half is all ceiling and sky. So what we want to do is this, and I know we can't see you right now, but I'm going to ask you to play this with me. If you can see yourself on video anywhere, what you're going to do is you're going to hold up one hand. You're going to make the itty bitty sign with your fingers so that your fingers may be an inch or two apart. You're going to put it on top of your head, and then you're going to adjust your screen so that when you're sitting in your comfortable position, your head is about that far from the top and your index finger is touching the top of your screen. And if you allow yourself to have the distance of the camera where you're from kind of mid torso up, this is what the news anchors on whatever channel you prefer to watch this is how they're framed in their screen. So it's not just about commanding the room when you're live, but it's about commanding the screen in person. This is where you are relatable. People can see your hands, they can see more of your body language, and it's like you're sitting across the table from them. It's as close to being in person as you're going to get. You don't want to be like the giant face in the middle of the screen, and you don't want to be so far away that you're a little blip back there. But usually from mid torso to the top of your head, taking up the full screen is the power positioning on virtual influence. Okay, and then finally, going back. Good. Now that was P for pegs. E is for eye contact or eyebrows. You certainly want to be able to look at the screen. When in doubt, take the image of yourself or the image of the people who are there and drag them up so that they're right underneath the camera. If you're someone who can't help but look at yourself when you're on video, put yourself right under your camera so you can stare at that person looking back at you, and then it feels to the audience like you're looking at them. Also be mindful of your eyebrows, just because if you tend to do the scrunchy face when you're thinking like this, people will think you're angry. So you want to be mindful of resetting that face. Gestures. Here's a simple rule of thumb. When you're presenting, you want to win an Oscar, not look like one. So having some gestures of some sort is valuable. You don't want to sit there and not move the entire time. That's really kind of boring, and it doesn't particularly engage or make you look comfortable, much less approachable and relatable and someone people want to talk to. But you don't want to go to the opposite extreme either and look like one of these guys. That's a little over the top, and sometimes people can lose track of exactly how much space they're taking up. So when in doubt, understand that the rule of thumb is that your gestures should reinforce the meaning or the sentiment behind what you're saying. Ideally both, but at least one, if not the other. And finally, the S is for smile. We forget to do it. And it is one of those things where your facial expressions in general, but especially the smile, is something that needs to complement whatever you're talking about. People tend to give good news or talk about whatever updates there are and just be so focused on the content that they always look like the guy on the right. So people are not enthusiastic about listening to you because you don't seem enthusiastic about what you're saying. It's not that you always need to smile, but just be mindful because people take their cue from you. Whatever mood you project through your face, which influences your voice, that's the filter that they're going to use when listening to whatever you say. So that gets set before you even open your mouth. Watch your facial expressions, and when possible, remember to smile. So my point for all of you, as I wrap up here, I'm going to go and follow my own advice. If you forget everything else I said, remember that you need to align your verbal, vocal, and visual messaging in order to create your own unique and authentic sound of leadership, establish credibility, and have more influence. And if you don't do anything else about it, angle your camera right and upgrade your mic. There's a real action. This is the philosophical summary of the whole program, but your to-do list, buy a new mic and adjust your camera angle. Make sure your lights are good. All right. So from here, I'm going to ask you guys in the chat if you can type in your big aha moment and any additional questions you have. I think we still have a couple more minutes. I'm very happy to answer any additional points that I may have missed along the way. And while you're typing, I will share if this was important to you and you got some really good tips today, this is just a nugget that shows the overall topic of my book, Speaking to Influence, which is available on Amazon in paperback, Audible, and Kindle editions. Feel free to reach out to me personally on LinkedIn or through any of these other platforms. And if you do reach out on LinkedIn, please tell me just remind me that this is where you saw me, because I get a lot of random people. If I don't know who they are, I often don't answer, and I would hate to miss that. Great. I'm glad to see. So don't slump down. I see tips in the chat box, things like new microphone and headset, how to frame your face. Takeaways are prepping about remembering to, and I want to make sure, Sharon, that I'm understanding that. Always prep what to say and how, or if the issue is that you tend to always prep what to say and not how, and so you need to shift it and remember to prep the how as well. That's a great takeaway. Ordering the mic today, yay. Yes, be kind to others. It is very generous, frankly. And then understanding the sound fatigue of Zoom and any other virtual messaging. Let's see, question, okay, has just come up. How do you have the same influence level when you take visual away? Now presenting mostly when you're not on camera. So remember that balance. People say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's actually both. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's how they gel, right? Does what you say match how you say it? If not, it's confusing, and the how you say it takes precedent. So if people can't see your visual, then you have to really make sure that your vocal is leading them the way you want them to go, that it is setting the tone. If you sound enthusiastic, they'll be enthusiastic. If you sound like, well, okay, so I'm just sort of going through the motions here, and now I'm on slide 16, and we have 1,400 more to go before the end of the day. So let's get moving, everybody. That's the tone that you set. That's what everybody else is going to hear. And before you get through your first sentence, people are thinking, oh boy, she doesn't even want to do this. Well, maybe I'll check my email or my phone messages and just sort of pay attention. I'll multitask because this is going to be painful if I try to focus on it. You need to make sure that you lead with your voice, that people infer not just what you say, they hear what you say, but they infer how you feel about it from the tone that you set. That's totally on you. Your voice has to be in it. It's not acting, it's not being melodramatic, but you got to put some energy into it to make sure that they're following with you. Let's see, how you show up is key. So Charlie, I hope that helped. Let's see, slowing down your speech. Great. Sounds being bombarded with Mike. Yep. And let's see, tips for dealing with people who try to dominate the conversation, men or otherwise. So whether it's virtual or in person, an easy way, if you keep getting interrupted by the same person, when in doubt, gently use their name. So let's say Mike keeps cutting you off about talking. And when he does, you can turn and say, hey, Mike, 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 hey, Mike, Mike, hey, Mike, Mike, thanks. I appreciate it. Let me finish what I was saying. And then I would definitely love to hear your response, but just let me finish this point. Thanks. So using their name 2, 3, sometimes 8 times does get somebody to stop talking. And as long as you're not witchy in the tone, just gently persistent, it'll usually be enough to make them stop. And they don't want to hear their own name spoken 75 times. So the people will realize the flow quite quickly. And let's see what else here. Questions. Proper chairs. Ugh, I'm 5 feet tall, 5'1" on a good day, without shoes, that is. There are no chairs other than like secretarial task chairs or whatever they call them that are built for people my size. So frankly, the best thing that I got was a couple years ago when I had my son. This was a maternity backrest. And it is the best thing I ever bought because it's got a nice curve for some lumbar support. It's just the right size. And it has made my life so much more comfortable. It's the only thing that doesn't kill me. So, I'd spent truckloads of money in the past from Brookstone and, all these other kinds of companies trying to buy it. This is the only one that actually worked for me. It's a lot of trial and error. But when in doubt, go to the maternity store and buy a backrest. Because if there's anybody who needs back support, it's a pregnant woman. And the support doesn't change after you're not pregnant anymore. So there's my brand recommendation, I suppose. Standing versus sitting when you're the presenter. Okay, so as far as that is concerned, I would say that if you're not going to be moving around, if people are going to see you on video, you need to stay in the frame. That being said, if you can prop up your camera and prop up whatever you need so that you're not, staring down at it, if it's on the desk, but you're standing up 3 feet above where the desk is, if it helps you get more energy and be a little more alive when you present, knock yourself out. If you're not on camera, then standing up and looking down at your notes or down at your screen, that's fine because it doesn't matter what direction you're looking. If you know that it'll help with your energy and with what you sound like, definitely do it. Just don't let it compromise what you see. You don't want to stand up here and then have people only see this from here to here on the video. That's not going to help you. So, and you don't want to have to tip your screen like way up so it's getting the nostril shot. Just make sure that you don't compromise the visual if you need to stand up. But, if you can do it, great. All right, let's see. We are just about, I think, at the end of time. So this is my podcast. If you liked what you heard today, do please check it out. I would appreciate it. And if you feel the love, a 5-star rating on it and a subscription would be extremely appreciated. But either way, I do thank all of you for, and this is a quick start guide to mastering exactly what I was just talking about in those 3 C's, the ability to command the room, connect with the audience, and close the deal. You can get that at speakingtoinfluence.com. And from there, we did the ahas. I thank you. That's my direct email address. Feel free to write to me if there's anything I can help with. And otherwise, I will say thank you to Wendy and Harriet for supervising this whole thing.
Thanks, Laura. Great presentation. I'm going to work on that because I got a little bit too much room above my head here.
We got to tip that down for you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. If anybody else has any questions, I'm happy to stick around. Thank you, Marianne. Hey, Harriet.
Wonderful. Always learn something from you. Excellent presentation. I'm going to end this in a few minutes because I want to stop the recording and I have to start the networking session.
Okay.
So anybody asking any other questions? I don't want to cut anybody off.
Yeah, I think we have, just looking at basic, thank you, Charlie. Not sure, I see there's one hand raised. Lindsay, you've got your hand up. I don't know if that was just from previous. Oh, I think she just disappeared.
I posted the link to your VIP section on your website.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording.